What really scary horror story really happened in your life or to the people you know? Story 1. Many years ago, pre-cell phone, a friend of mine got a call from the police. "Lock your doors, hide, we're on our way over." Her angry ex had hired someone to break into her house, make it look like a burglary gone bad, and kill her. Through a bizarre coincidence with equally bizarre timing, someone arrested for another unrelated charge offered a bigger fish if they let him walk. The bigger fish was that his body had been hired to kill her. By the time they validated the story and identified the people, they were able to determine that the hired killer was likely already on the way to her house. In the few minutes between the phone call and the police arriving, he had started breaking into the house. A long sequence of perfectly timed unlikely events was the only thing that stood between her and a certain death. Story 2. At my old job, I got a call from the police that they kicked a couple doors in and needed me to come out to fix them. Turns out some guy got drunk and thought his woman was cheating on him. He went on the wrong apartment thinking it was hers. The normal guy living in the apartment put a few holes in him with a knife, and the dude realized his mistake, bolted up 3 flights of stairs, and his girlfriend let him right in. She wasn't cheating. Cops show up and kicked that door in and arrested him. The smell of that much blood is something I won't forget. Story 3. When I was a teenager, I went to drive to a friend's house when it was dark, and before I could exit our neighborhood, 2 cars pulled in from the main street, each taking a lane, and stopped intentionally blocking the exit. I had come to a stop about 50 feet away, just trying to figure out what was going on. After a few seconds, they both accelerated in my direction. I threw it in reverse and did my best to back away, but I realized pretty quickly that 1, they would catch up to me, or 2, I was going to break my car and they would still catch up to me, so I went with option 1 and stopped on my own. They drove up and boxed me in against the curb. Both cars each had 4 old men in them. The driver of the car next to me angrily shouted at me. Both our windows were down. "Where's Caroline?" Confused, I just said, "What?" With even more anger, he asked about Caroline again. This time, I just said, "Who?" I legit didn't know any Carolines. At that time, he relaxed, calmed his voice, and said, "Oh, wrong person, sorry," and drove on. The other car followed him and also said an apology out of their window as they drove by. I was shaken up for a minute, but just drove on to my friends after that. It took me a few years to realize there was someone else in my neighborhood who drove the same make, model, and even color car as mine, and it was a relatively obscure type of car, so that's probably why they were so sure of themselves that I was whoever they were looking for. Story 4. I live in Costa Rica, and about a year ago, 2 Danish tourists girls in their late teens got a tuk-tuk back to their hotel from a bar in town. It was about 8 p.m., so not late. The tuk-tuk driver suddenly took a turn off the road and took the girls down a dark lane to a deserted piece of beach while a load of his buddies were waiting. They ran and beat the girls repeatedly until 4 in the morning, when they left them for death on the beach. One managed to get up and in her frightened shock ran naked into the jungle and got lost. They didn't find her until after midday the next day, suffering from exhaustion and dehydration on top of her considerable injuries. The other one made it up onto the main road and stumbled into a cafe where they called the police. What's worse is the police showed up and didn't take her seriously, saying that she was probably drunk and it was her own fault. The local population was up in arms and subsequently boycotted the tuk-tuks. There were demonstrations, and eventually the police confiscated all the tuk-tuks and sent more police to the area. We now have a new police station. The previous one was a broken-down old bus with 2 outside toilets with bars on them for holding cells, and there has been a crackdown on sexual violence in the area. Typically, though, the gang that attacked these poor girls was never apprehended, despite it being common knowledge in town who it was. Story 5. I grew up in a third world country, and in the beginning of the 90s, a civil war broke out. We would often wake up to the screams of people getting killed by terrorists in the night. We would go up to the roof while my brother guarded the house holding a rifle. I would grab my dog and my brother would berate me for wasting time on her. She was stolen a few months later and I never saw her again. Her name was Lisa. Story 6. I went to high school with a girl who, accompanied by her boyfriend, killed another girl, actually up the street from where I live now. They put her body in a rolling suitcase and dumped her in the river. Despite draining the entire bay, her body was never found. I'm horrified by the realization that the suitcase will likely rise to the surface one day. Story 7. So, I was about 8 at the time. It was something like 1 or 2 in the morning. I go to the bathroom. It is rather bright outside despite the time. I'm sitting on the toilet, playing with the curtain. It comes up enough and I see a shadow standing outside the window. I scream and my mom comes running. I tell her there is something standing outside the bathroom window. Now, my mom, being the crazy motherfucker she is, throws open the curtain, opens the window, ready to fight a motherfucker guy outside the window? No. There. Window is promptly shut, and I'm quickly ushered out of the bathroom. This event furthers the talk my parents had been having off and on about moving. On a side note, we moved about 2 years later for a number of other reasons. Funny enough, there is now a bear roaming this neighborhood. He's been spotted on my parents' front porch at least twice now. Story 8. I came home from my homecoming dance. It was 2 a.m. In high school, I was a pretty blue-eyed blonde. I went to hang my coat in the closet and heard something brush against the front door. Thought it was the wind blowing the fall breeze. Walking to my bedroom, I realized earlier that day I had seen my mom take the breeze down. As I reached to pull my bedroom shade down, I see a grown man standing right in front of my bedroom. My lights were off. I didn't think he saw me see him. I army crawled into my parents' room. Woke up my dad. "Dad, there's a man outside my window." My dad ran across the hall and leapt over my bed in a single bound. Grabbed my lamp and nearly went through the window at him. 2 things I will never forget that night. The profile of that man's face and the sounds my dad made nearly going through that window. He became an animal. Not sure which was more terrifying. He didn't go through the window, thankfully. The guy ran. My mom called the police. They came with a canine unit. Police found cigarette butts by my bedroom window, all the same brand. They looked to be various ages, some new, some old. That's where it got really weird. Was he doing this for a week? A month? What was his intent? I slept in my parents' room for months. Wouldn't be home alone. Amazing how long it takes to get over seeing someone outside a window. Let me know your stories in the comments to be part of a future video. Like and subscribe to be notified of new uploads, and click on this video to hear more stories.